Hi folks, Mackenzie Lambert here, your host from Mack and the Movies. Thanks for taking time to give this episode a listen. It's a special one. We're going to take a look at the first 5 films featuring the Italian film duo Bud Spencer and Terence Hill. The duo worked together on over 20 films, so you can expect we'll revisit them later on down the line. Today we'll be taking a look at their spaghetti westerns, the Cat and Hutch trilogy for director Giuseppe Colizzi, and the pair of Trinity films for director Enzo Barboni. Before we look at the films, let's explore the backgrounds of these two gents. Bud Spencer was born Carlo Pedersoli on Halloween of 1929. He sadly passed away on June 27, 2016. During his youth, he was a gifted swimmer. He studied chemistry at the Sapienza University of Rome. He participated in the 1952 Summer Olympics, reaching the semifinals of the 100-meter freestyle. He was also an award-winning water polo player. His swimming career came to an end in 1957. His acting career began back in 1949 with the Italian comedy Quel Fantasma de Mio Marito. He would make sporadic film appearances from then on. In 1960, he was signed to RCA Records to write lyrics for in-house performers. One of these performers was Nico Fidenco. Fidenco would make a career for himself as a film composer. His credits include 5 of the Laura Gemser Emanuelle films, 2 of the 3 Fantastic Superman films, and the infamous Zombie Holocaust. In 1967, Pedersoli worked with director Giuseppe Colizzi for the film God Forgives, I Don't, where he was paired with Mario Garatti. While Pedersoli and Garatti worked together previously on the 1959 film Hannibal, it was God Forgives, I Don't that both men were featured as a duo. Mario Garatti was born on March 29, 1939. He's still alive today and still acting. He was born to a German mother and Italian father. At age 12, he was discovered by director Dino Risi for the Italian comedy Holiday with the Gangster. He acted in 27 films before landing a major role in Luchino Visconti's The Leopard in 1963. In 2010, Spencer and Hill were honored with the David Di Donatello Award for their accomplishments as both a duo and solo acting. The origins of their screen names are amusing. Pedersoli picked the name Bud Spencer, Bud being a reference to Budweiser, and Spencer being a tribute to actor Spencer Tracy. Film producers gave Garatti a list of possible names. He went with Terence Hill because the name had the same initials as his mother. As anyone who is familiar with the Italian film industry, when a trend or specific film was an international success, there were producers and filmmakers that tried to capitalize on that success with imitations. Spencer and Hill had their share of copycats. The most glaring example would be the duo of Paul L. Smith and Michael Colby, real name Antonio Cantafora. If you go back to episode 6, when I was going through the first volume of the Grindhouse Experience, I touched a little bit on the interesting career of Mr. Smith. He was the Bud Spencer-esque crime boss in the Hong Kong classic Return of the Tiger. Those familiar with internet memes might be familiar with the "Can I copy your homework" meme. One student tells the other to change their work so the teacher won't notice. Well, the producers at Film Ventures International predate that meme by around 40 years. With the duo of Paul Smith and Michael Colby, Film Ventures changed their name. To capitalize on Bud Spencer and Terence Hill, Film Ventures gave their duo the names Bob Spencer and Terence Hall.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Smith would sue Film Ventures over this name change. In his statement, Smith claimed, "The only thing an actor has is his name, and if it's taken away, he has nothing." The judicial system sided with Smith, awarding him damages and recompense for his court costs. Now let's jump right into the movies, starting with God Forgives, I Don't. God Forgives, I Don't starts with a train arriving in the town of Canyon City. The train fails to stop and crashes through the security barriers. Seemingly, all people on board were shot, execution style. Unbeknownst to the shocked public, one wounded survivor sneaks away. On the train was a loot of $100,000 in gold. Cat Stevens is a card shark with a habit of getting in trouble. By all appearances, insurance agent Hutch Bessie is pursuing Cat. It turns out they're both partners in search of the gold and the culprit responsible for pulling off the heist. Bessie was able to find out the information from the wounded survivor before he died. Bessie and Cat discover the location of the gold, but to their surprise, the loot was robbed by Bill San Antonio. Bill was originally believed to be killed in a duel by Cat. Now, Cat has a chance to help Hutch take back the gold and finish off Bill once and for all. Fans who only know the comedic films with Spencer and Hill during the early 70s to the mid-80s will be taken aback by how serious and gritty a spaghetti western God Forgives, I Don't is. While Spencer has a unique look to him that evades any comparison to another western actor, Hill is clearly channeling Clint Eastwood. He has the same cold stare and bright eyes. There is a section of the film where Cat and Hutch find the gold and they hide it by burying it. Bill catches up with them and has them violently interrogated. Cat is drowned at the bottom of a well. He can't swim, which plays well with his name. Hutch is brutally burned with a metal poker. Compared to the torture of Tuco in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, these sequences are not as drawn out, but they still make you wince. Here, Spencer and Hill have that spark of chemistry that would be further built upon in future films. They have that dichotomy reminiscent of classic comedy teams like Abbott and Costello or Laurel and Hardy. Spencer is the husky strongman, while Hill is the thin, wilier of the two. The comparison to Laurel and Hardy was considered a badge of honor for Hill.
Well, Bud Stenson and myself were associated with Laurel and Hardy. I can only be thrilled and happy about it because I loved Laurel and Hardy, and I still love them, and that's a compliment. It's absolutely a compliment.
Frank Wolf is having a great time as Bill San Antonio. He has that playfulness about him, yet there is a sense of menace as well. There's a hint of Heath Ledger's Joker in his performance, even coming off as effeminate at times. Wolf got his start in 50s monster movies like The Wasp Woman and Beast from Haunted Cave. He often appeared in spaghetti westerns, notably the first film in Tony Anthony's Stranger series, A Stranger in Town, and the Leone epic Once Upon a Time in the West. Keep your eyes open for brief appearances by a few character actors. Frank Branagh, famous for his turns in the Chainsaw Giallo Pieces and the infamous E.T. ripoff Pod People,
It stinks.
makes a quick turn as a poker player. I tried to look for Joaquin Blanco, but I couldn't find him. He's best known for being one of the scientists of the Hope Center in the opening scene for Bruno Mattei's Hell of the Living Dead. God Forgives, I Don't is an enjoyable spaghetti western in its own right. Yet, this film is best remembered for being the beginning of the cinematic camaraderie of Bud Spencer and Terence Hill. That alone makes the film worth seeing. The film is a bit tricky to find, but I was able to stream it off of the Internet Archive. Ace High begins almost immediately where God Forgives, I Don't ended. Cat and Hutch arrive in town to claim the bounty on the head of Bill San Antonio. When they're brushed away, they claim to be at the bank on behalf of Bill San Antonio. The bank manager, Mr. Harold, sees them only to be beaten up by the pair and gives them a cashier's check for their troubles. That night, Mr. Harold visits condemned prisoner Kakopoulos. Kakopoulos was framed for a murder after spending 15 years in jail for being caught after a robbery. Mr. Harold needs him to get the money back he lost to Cat and Hutch. Harold's request is refused at first. Then Harold's men come in and break out Kakopoulos. The crafty robber kills Harold's men and then goes to see his old associate, who he swiftly guns down. Now free, Kakopoulos is hunting the other conspirators that left him high and dry 15 years ago. While traveling, he accosts both Cat and Hutch. He takes their money and he heads off to the border. Cat and Hutch track him to a cantina. There they meet Thomas, an acrobat who is a friend of Kakopoulos. In a borderline psychedelic sequence, Hutch catches Kakopoulos while Cat is looking elsewhere. Here, Kakopoulos offers Hutch a deal where he will pay back the money of theirs that he spent if he gets the money owed to him by his former partners. One of them is a bandito named Paco, who is in the process of eliminating those he deems a threat to his revolution. The other, a casino owner named Drake, who has a knack for rigging games in favor of the house. With their targets known, the quartet of Kakopoulos, Hutch, Cat, and Thomas aim to get the money. Director and screenwriter Giuseppe Colizzi and stars Bud Spencer and Terence Hill do what should be accomplished in a sequel. They further develop the relationship between Cat and Hutch, they raise the stakes for the heroes, they expand the scope of the film. For the second film in a trilogy, it hits all the right notes. While God Forgives, I Don't was a serious western, Ace High was the beginning of Spencer and Hill adopting their comedic antics and incorporating comedy in general. Hill notes that this was the intention of Colizzi.
So we came from having made 3 movies where the director, Giuseppe Colizzi, started putting a little bit of humor in it. And they were called God Forgives, I Don't, Ace High with Eli Wallach and us, and Boot Hill with Brock Peters.
We see both men's signature fighting styles. When Cat and Hutch beat up Harold, the building literally shakes. There's a wormy bookkeeper that works for Harold that has this ridiculously large ledger to keep track of accounts. The cantina sequence has to be one of the craziest moments you'll see in a spaghetti western. In one gunfight, Hutch uses the dead bodies of 2 henchmen as a shield. Spencer and Hill are great as you would expect in this film. Eli Wallach as the Greek-Mexican bandit Kakopoulos was a real treat for me. I loved his performance as Tuco in Leone's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. In Ace High, he essentially plays the same character, and I am totally okay with that. He has a charisma and a troublemaker charm that makes him one of the best character actors we've had the pleasure of bearing witness to. Brock Peters plays Thomas the Acrobat. When sharing the scene with Wallach, Spencer, and Hill, he gets lost in their screen presence. Yet, he manages to hold his own. He's probably best known for playing Tom Robinson in the 1962 film adaptation of Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Not to be confused with the internet classic How to Kill a Mockingbird. Kevin McCarthy was a welcomed addition as the casino owner Drake. His presence, along with Peters and Wallach, further reinforce Fred the Hammer Williamson's appreciation for the Italian film industry. According to the Italian producers and directors, once you're famous, you retain that respect and reverence. McCarthy has a number of genre credits, including but not limited to both the 1956 and 1978 films of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Howling for Joe Dante, Twilight Zone the movie, and the Weird Al cult classic UHF. Here we see again Stefan Zacharias, who plays Mr. Harold. We saw him quite a bit in the Grindhouse Experience, mostly in comedic roles in The Violent Professionals, as well as Mean Frank and Crazy Tony. Here he plays a straight menacing character that makes for a solid foil for Wallach's more wily behavior. Zacharias manages to give an air of menace while he's in control of the situation. You know, I gotta say, the man has versatility. Ace High is a strong sequel to God Forgives, I Don't. The film gives us the hints of comedy that would be associated with Spencer and Hill for their future collaborations. Wallach is a pure joy to see essentially reprise the role of Tuco. Other character talent fill out the supporting roles in satisfactory fashion. The only method of streaming I found was on Amazon Prime for $2.99, and for that price it's well worth it. Boot Hill opens with Cat Stevens still up to his card shark ways. Unfortunately, he draws the ire of Finch and his men. Shots of Cat evading his pursuers are cut back and forth with trapeze artists engaging in their risky maneuvers. This was actually a nice visual analogy courtesy of editor Tatiana Cassini-Morighi. Despite being wounded, Cat manages to escape, going into hiding in a circus wagon. Thomas, one of the circus performers and a former gunfighter himself, finds Cat in the wagon. He provides him first aid and allows him to rest in the wagon before going on his own. While traveling, the circus caravan is halted when some of Finch's men meet them. They suspect Cat is among the circus wagons. The men find evidence of Cat's presence, but they are quickly gunned down by both Cat and Thomas. When at the next town, Finch's men arrive at the same time the circus is performing. They find traces of Cat and go into the big top. While Thomas's son is performing a blindfold trapeze act, he is shot down by one of Finch's men, both out of retaliation and blatant racism. Thomas's son dies shortly after taking the high fall, and the circus members split up shortly after. Still recovering from his wound, Kat meets back up with Thomas. Thomas needs Kat so he can get revenge on the man who killed his son. Turns out Finch was after Kat because he won a deed to a prospecting claim. Finch wanted the claim for a baron named Fisher, who was quietly stealing the claims of other prospectors for his own gain. No one rises against him out of fear for being taken out by his own personal army. Kat reunites with his friend Hutch, who has enjoyed a life of relative obscurity. Kat and Thomas need Hutch to help with their plan to take down Fisher. In a matter of days, the county commissioner will be in town to review the claims. Using the circus, they hope to expose the villainous methods of Fisher in front of the county commissioner and restore the claims to their rightful owners. I can't help but feel A Bug's Life kind of took elements from this film. The sequence of the circus trying to incite the rebellion of the prospectors was actually a joy to watch. It's reminiscent of the theatrical performance in Shakespeare's Hamlet, which was meant to expose the guilt of Claudius for murdering old Hamlet. There is a comedic sketch showing a prospector being outright robbed by a henchman. There's a song and dance number hinting at the prospectors to look under their seats to find the guns that were put there for them to fight back against Fisher. Yet, under the seat with Fisher's men, there's only noisemakers. There's no shortage of plot threads to keep your attention. There's the main plot of the oppressed prospectors, then there's the bad blood between Kat and Finch, Thomas out for revenge for the death of his son. There's even a small thread for Hutch's deaf-mute friend, Baby Doll, who falls in love with one of the circus dance girls. Director Colizzi brings the Kat and Hutch trilogy to a satisfying close. The film features a cast of notable talents. The scale of the plot is as big as this film could allow. Despite the seemingly micro nature of the setting, the threat of the villains can be felt throughout the running time. The comedy is slightly amped up, but the film still takes itself seriously for the most part. The comedy really shows itself in the fistfights where Bud Spencer does his powerhouse antics that were his signature. Of the three films in the trilogy, the music in this entry by Carlo Rustichelli is the most memorable. This is the first time in the three films that the music I actually took notice of. The stunts in this film are impressive given the age of the film. Nazareno Zamparella and Alberto Dell'Acqua pull double duty as both stuntmen and members of the circus troupe. Zamparella would coordinate the stunts for films ranging from Three Tough Guys with Isaac Hayes, Street Law with Franco Nero, Demons 2, Cemetery Man, and Cutthroat Island. Dell'Acqua came from a quartet of brothers who would all become stuntmen in Italian cinema. Keep an eye out for Romano Papo making another Mack in the Movies appearance as the henchman that kills Thomas's son. For being the third film, Spencer and Hill have that chemistry that makes them seem as if they have been working together on many more films by this time. They know how to play off one another. The American talent in the film is nothing to sneeze at. Woody Strode made a name for himself in films like The Ten Commandments, The Professionals, Keoma, Once Upon a Time in the West. His last acting credit would be for the Sam Raimi homage to spaghetti westerns, The Quick and the Dead. You also have Victor Buono from Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, and the Italian West Germany co-production The Mad Butcher. But many, many more will remember him as King Tut from the Adam West Batman TV series. The most notable takeaway for me was seeing a young George Eastman. Here he is with this baby face and cheerful mannerisms. This is probably one of the only times I've ever seen him play a clear-cut good guy. Later in his career, he would earn infamy playing a father-turned-superhuman cannibal in Anthropophagus, aka the Grim Reaper. He would also play various characters in a number of post-apocalyptic films, whether it's 2019 After the Fall of New York, Warriors of the Wasteland, and 1990 The Bronx Warriors. Of the three films in the Kat and Hutch trilogy, this is my favorite. It's absolutely perfect. Great cast, a nice mix of action, drama, and comedy, and an effective music score. While this was part of a trilogy, this film can be enjoyed on its own without having to see any of the previous films. You'll actually find this film retitled as Trinity Rides Again. Clearly, producers tried to retrofit this film into the Trinity films that we're about to talk about. This is also one of the easiest to find. You can watch it on the Tubi TV app, but you can also see the whole movie on YouTube. They Call Me Trinity opens with a sleeping man being carted by his horse on a rickety travois. He stops at a small cantina for food and drink. While there, he's harassed by a pair of bounty hunters who are accompanied by a wounded Mexican farmer. When the bounty hunters are sure that the stranger is not a wanted man, they go back to harassing their companion. After finishing his meal, the man approaches the bounty hunters, identifying himself as Trinity, the right hand of the devil. Trinity takes the wounded man and tells the bounty hunter he's taking him to a doctor. At first, they offer no resistance. Clearly, Trinity's reputation precedes him. But with Trinity's back turned, the bounty hunters foolishly try to shoot him, only to be swiftly gunned down. Trinity and the Mexican go into the next town. As they arrive, some henchmen of the local horse baron, Major Harriman, call out the sheriff. Trinity identifies the sheriff as Bambino, the left hand of the devil and his brother. Bambino takes out the henchman with no problem. Trinity and the Mexican go to speak with Bambino for a not-so-cheery reunion. Bambino patches up the Mexican and has him rest in one of the cells. Then Bambino shares with Trinity how he became the sheriff. Bambino busted out of prison and rode towards California. During his travel, he noticed that he was being followed. Nervous, he shot the man following him. It turns out the guy was the sheriff assigned to the very town that Bambino is the sheriff of. Bambino is currently playing the sheriff to buy time until his associates join him and they can pull off another major heist. At the same time, a Mormon farming community has set up home in a valley that the major was eyeing for his horses to graze. Not only does he show hostility to the pacifist group, but also a band of Mexican banditos harass the farmers. Trinity and Bambino find themselves in a tough situation where they have to protect the farmers from both factions. They Call Me Trinity marks the transition of the duo from westerns that were serious for the most part to films comedic in nature. From the snappy dialogue to the increased acts of physical comedy to the set pieces, this is the Bud Spencer and Terence Hill that everyone would become familiar with. This garnered a lot of positive feedback from parents who took their kids to see They Call Me Trinity.
Didn't find me typecast at all, but I did typecast myself on my own will, because up until then I had done all kinds of movies, dramatic movies, but after the two Trinities movie, they would stop me, especially mothers in the street, more than once, and said, please, 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 keep doing movies like these, because we want to be able to take our kids to the theaters without expecting anything that they couldn't see or couldn't watch. So this gave me the responsibility of keeping on doing movies that were for all audiences. So in that sense, I typecasted myself.
Writer-director Enzo Barbone would set the precedent for the duo's future films, even making the most out of some minor character details. For example, the nicknames for Bambino and Trinity are respectively the left hand and right hand of the devil, and both men shoot with those corresponding hands. There were a few great moments in the film. There's the confrontation where the major brings in the menacing-looking gunfighters, only for them to be thoroughly embarrassed and run out of town with their pants shot off. The fight in the general store where Trinity takes out a couple of the major's goons is a stunning mix of acrobatics and slapstick comedy, equal parts Jackie Chan and Harold Lloyd. I'll have a link to the fight in the description of this episode just because it needs to be seen to be believed. This is the first film in the titles reviewed for this episode where the music was integral to the film. The music score by Franco Michalizzi adds so much to the fun spirit. David King's vocals almost serve as a parody themselves of spaghetti western singers like Rocky Roberts. There's a lounge singer tone that just fits the comedy. This is one of the films I was able to find some mainstream critical reception for. Roger Ebert, back in his 1971 review of the film, commented on the looks of Hill's character, being unorthodox as one would expect from a spaghetti western hero. He also recalls his shared meal with Bud Spencer, where Spencer pondered the idea of doing a spoof of spaghetti westerns, but as a loving tribute to the subgenre. And this was years before Blazing Saddles did such for American westerns. New York Times critic Howard Thompson praised the film for eschewing the typical bloodbaths of the genre in favor of physical comedy and the hilarious dialogue. Stefan Zacharias makes another appearance as the character of Jonathan, the assistant to Sheriff Bambino. Compared to his role as Harold in Ace High, his turn as Jonathan is the kind of comedic role that would make up his career as an actor. I would say that Zacharias was one of the top funny men in Italy. While on the subject of comedic performances, Michel Cimarosa, as the wounded Mexican we meet at the start of the film, manages to sneak his way into other scenes. When he's being tended to by Trinity and Bambino for his wound, they give him so much booze as an anesthetic that he becomes an alcoholic. Whenever we see him on camera for the remainder of the film, he's either drinking or in a drunken stupor. Alberto Dell'Acqua returns from Boot Hill along with two of his brothers, Roberto and Arnaldo. Alberto was the elder brother, starting back in 1953. Roberto would have a solid stunt career, working under the likes of Enzo G. Castellari, Lucio Fulci, and Umberto Lenzi. Arnaldo would be the second oldest, his top credits including Fulci's Zombie and Your Hunter from the Future. The youngest and still active of the brothers, Octaviano, wouldn't start his career until 1974. The biggest surprise for me with this film was the performance by Farley Granger as Major Harriman. If I didn't know better, or maybe I don't, but I have a suspicion that Harvey Korman modeled his performance as Hedley Lamar for Blazing Saddles off of Granger's performance. Korman's delivery of lines is very similar to Granger's. Given the international success of They Call Me Trinity, it wouldn't be surprised if this is true. Granger would be one of Hitchcock's go-to actors, featuring him in classics like Rope and Strangers on a Train. Of all the films I reviewed for this episode, They Call Me Trinity is the one you need to see. It's a great mix of comedy and seeing the duo of Spencer and Hill finally hit their stride. The music by Michelizzi is a gem. Granger as the Major almost steals the film for himself. You've got to be Trinity. Trinity Is Still My Name opens with four outlaws on the lam. They are approached by Bambino. Through some basic trickery, he ends up robbing all four of them. Not long after he rides off, Trinity meets the same four robbers. Through some underhanded methods, Trinity robs the four outlaws of more of their money. Trinity arrives home, much to the delight of his mother and father. Bambino is already inside and is not too happy to be under the same roof as his brother. With health declining, the father begs for his youngest son, Trinity, to learn how to be an infamous outlaw like his horse-stealing brother. The father makes a reference to Trinity being a card shark, a nice nod to the Cat and Hutch trilogy. The father wants Bambino to mentor Trinity, much to Bambino's chagrin. While traveling to town, Trinity and Bambino find a covered wagon with a broken wheel. Bambino sees this as a great opportunity to teach Trinity how to rob civilians. Turns out the wagon belongs to a poor farmer family with a sick child. Trinity manages to guilt Bambino into helping change the wagon wheel and offers some money for medicine. All the while, Trinity meets the farmer's daughter and is immediately smitten with her. After fixing the wheel, they send the family off. The duo arrive in town to find out that there is a card shark named Hendrix. Trinity is keen to match his skill against Hendrix, with Bambino entering the game as Trinity's backup. Trinity makes short work of Hendrix in both cards and fisticuffs in a great comedic slap fight. The sequence is followed by a treat of a scene in a fancy restaurant where the pair try to adapt to their wealthy environment, with disastrously humorous results. Trinity and Bambino reunite with the farmer family, who recognize them as the Good Samaritan robbers. Trinity and Bambino pass themselves off as government agents. Unfortunately, this disguise draws the attention of Parker, a local arms dealer who bribes agents so he can continue his racket undisturbed. It turns out Parker is using a local mission as a front for hiding his wares. Now, Trinity and Bambino must stop the racket and protect the townspeople. While the Trinity series would continue with the 1995 film The Sons of Trinity, Trinity Is Still My Name marked the final spaghetti western pairing for Spencer and Hill until 1994's The Troublemakers. This one maintains the lighthearted nature of the previous film. The comedy has overtaken the action and any seriousness that was part of previous narratives of the duo. Changing up the tone of a film can be enough to keep the film series interesting. Spencer and Hill still have that chemistry that makes them enjoyable to watch. Trinity Is Still My Name marks the film debut of Guido and Mauricio de Angelis, the first of 197 credits as composers. You can tell they were new to film composition. Their theme, Trinity Still Stands, is a decent track for their first outing, but pales in comparison to their later works for films like Street Law, The Big Racket, Watch Out We're Mad, and They Call Him Bulldozer. Trinity Is Still My Name is a fun movie. While They Call Me Trinity was the better film, this offering is still a movie worth your time. This is a good film to stop with as the pair would move away from spaghetti westerns and into more contemporary placed comedies. I had fun with these movies, and I look forward to checking out their other films in a future episode of Mack and the Movies. And that finishes this episode. Thank you for listening. Next time on the program, we'll be taking a look at the trendsetters and the game changers of the horror subgenre of zombies. I'm Mackenzie Lambert with Mack and the Movies. Until next time, take care, folks.